Cooking for Health, a community cooking class brought to you by First Choice Community Healthcare, Agricultura Cooperative Network, La Cosecha, and other valued community partners. Welcome to the fourth video of our Power Plate theme. Joining us today is Chef Rosa Zamora with a veggie-packed tofu scramble.
Today we're going to be making a tofu scramble with a bunch of vegetables in it. The first thing we're going to start with is a block of extra firm or firm tofu. Tofu is a really healthy, cholesterol-free, plant-based protein source. And if you are worried about GMOs, just make sure you get organic tofu. I did get this one at Price Right. It's only $1.79 for a block of organic tofu. First thing we're going to do is we're going to press the water out of it. So we're just going to put that between two plates and just put like a bowl or something heavy on top of it, and we'll let the water drain out of that while we prep our vegetables. We are going to get a skillet going over medium heat with just a little bit of cooking oil, about a teaspoon. And we're going to start with our onion. First we're going to chop up the onion. And we're going to try to make everything diced and bite-sized so that when you eat it, you get a little bit of everything in every bite. So we'll just start by taking the outside off. Then we're just going to dice the onion by slicing it one way and then the other way. Fall apart. Just make sure you go through all the sections. This is just a medium yellow onion. You can do any kind of onion you like. And then we'll do the other half the same way. If you have any big chunks left over, just look, make sure everything looks nice and bite-sized. And then we're going to add all of this to the pan. Okay, and we are just going to cook this till the onions start to turn clear and brown a little bit. And while that's cooking, we're going to prepare our mushrooms next. This is just 8 ounces of white mushrooms, any mushrooms you like, about a ½ pound. And same thing, we're just going to dice these up along with the stems into bite-sized pieces. Mushrooms are a great source of vitamin D. Stir your onions every so often to make sure they're all getting cooked evenly. And this is really a recipe because you can switch out anything if you don't like mushrooms. Just leave them out or replace them with another vegetable. I just like to put a lot of vegetables in the tofu scramble because it really makes a complete meal between the protein from the tofu and all the fiber from the vegetables. And it's really filling this way too. And then as your chopping board fills up, you can just start adding the mushrooms and the onions as well. Everything's going to cook together in one pan. Makes it a nice simple way to cook too. Okay, that's all the mushrooms. The next thing we're going to add are some tomatoes, and you can either just chop up one large tomato or use, I got these cherry tomatoes because I think that in the winter when you can't get really good fresh tomatoes, I think they have the best tomato flavor. But since we're cooking and spicing it up, it doesn't matter. Just whatever kind of tomato you want. This is a 10-ounce container of cherry tomatoes, or you can do just one large tomato. And I'm just going to slice these in half. And I like to cook them down with the mushrooms and the onions so they get kind of charred and become saucy. If you like more fresh tomato flavor, you can also add these later in the cooking process when we add the tofu. And then you'll have more fresh tomato, up to you. Same thing, just start to add all your vegetables in and keep stirring it. We're just going to let everything get nice and a little bit crisp brown before we add the tofu. And you'll see the vegetables are starting to give off a little bit of water. That's perfect. And you notice we're not salting or seasoning anything right now. We're going to add a lot of seasonings and spices to the tofu because tofu is pretty bland. And a lot of people, I feel like when they say they don't like tofu, it's because they haven't had it spiced right. So we're going to put a lot of spices in it. And then not spice the vegetables as much, kind of let them speak on their own to keep it more low sodium too. Okay, now all of our tomatoes. Okay, and then while those keep getting brown and cooking down, we're going to prepare the tofu, which should be pretty well pressed by now. So you're just going to get your bowl. You can see a fair amount of water has come off of that, which is fine, but it's also okay if there's still a little water left in it, because we're going to saute it down. And we're going to put all of the spices directly on top of the tofu and then mash it all in together. So we're going to start with 1 teaspoon of nutritional yeast, which is really rich in B vitamins and gives it a really nice umami flavor. We're going to do a ½ teaspoon of all the rest of these next spices. So a ½ teaspoon of onion powder. Paprika, I really like the smoked paprika. It just gives it a little more flavor. Garlic powder. And turmeric. And the turmeric is nice. It makes it look kind of like a scrambled egg. It gives it that nice yellow color. Also has a lot of antioxidants, super good for you. And then we're going to do a 1/4 teaspoon of the last few spices, just a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, The tofu does have a fair amount of naturally occurring salt because of the way it's processed, so we don't want to add too much. 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, which is just going to be a few cracks. And then the last thing we're going to put in, this is called black salt. It's a sulfur-infused salt, and it's going to give it kind of that eggy flavor, but it's very strong, so just a 1/4 teaspoon of that. And this can be found at like specialty store. It's an Indian salt. Black salt can be found at like Talin or the Asian stores. But if you can't find it, you can leave it out. It doesn't need it. It just gives it another depth of flavor. And the same thing, if you don't like certain spices, if you don't like garlic, you can leave it out. Some people put curry powder in theirs. This is just the spice mix that I like. And then we're just gonna break this up with a fork. And I like mine crumbled pretty well. I like the scramble to be really fine and homogeneous because I think that's how it gets the most flavor. You can see these tomatoes are starting to break down a little bit. The onions are starting to brown. That's exactly what we're looking for. And we're just going to keep mashing this and stirring it until it all looks the same so that the spices are really evenly distributed. And you can see that even though we put all that turmeric in there, it's not super yellow. But as soon as we start cooking it, that turmeric flavor really and color comes out really good, and it's going to be bright yellow. It's pretty cool. Okay, I think that's just about well mixed. And these vegetables look like about there. And that's the nice thing about this. If you get all your ingredients ready, this really does kind of cook as you prepare it, and it's a nice simple dish. I also like to add 1 jalapeno to it at this stage. If you don't like spicy food, you can just leave it out, or if you prefer other chiles, you could do red and green chili on it, or whatever you like, but I like the fresh green flavor of the jalapeno. I think it really brings something to it. And we're just gonna dice that up. I leave the seeds in because I like it spicy, but you can always leave them out or add extra chili, depending on how you like it. And we'll do a little bit finer of a dice on this than everything else so that it really works its way into it and makes every bite spicy. We'll just add that. And we'll just stir that in, let that toast up for a minute just till you can kind of start to smell the spice of the jalapeno come out, so it's fragrant. Okay, now we're ready to add our tofu. We're just gonna add that right on top. And if you see a few little spice pockets, that's fine because we're gonna mix it up into vegetables now, so if you missed anything while mixing it, just make sure you give everything a good mix now. Toss everything to combine. Okay, all of our vegetables are mixed in really good. The last ingredient we're gonna add is a couple handfuls of greens. And these are just mixed greens. This is like kale and spinach and chard. About a half container, a couple handfuls, and that'll just go right on top. And then we are just going to cover this. And we're gonna let that steam down for a few minutes. It makes the tofu really fluffy to cook it with steam, and then it'll also let the greens wilt a minute. So we're just gonna let that sit for about a minute, and you'll kind of see the greens wilt, and then we'll pull it off and we'll see what we get. Like I said, tofu is a really good, healthy, plant-based protein source. No cholesterol, lower carbs, so this makes a great breakfast. It's a complete breakfast as is because we added so many vegetables, but if you want it a little heartier, you could do, you know, a side of roasted potatoes or roasted sweet potatoes with this, and a whole wheat tortilla or toast, and it's gonna give you tons of energy for the day. It's really filling, really satisfying, and like I said, you can take anything else you want. You don't like kale, leave it out, put spinach. You don't like greens, put zucchini. Really, any vegetables you can find are gonna be good in this. And just make sure that you cook them first so they get a little brown on them so that they have nice flavor. And you can see this is starting to steam. You see like the condensation. So that's about where we're gonna wanna be because the leaves are starting to turn kind of bright. We're gonna mix those in. And it's starting to get crispy on the bottom. And you can see too the color change, how it was kind of brownish. It does turn really bright yellow and looks really nice and kind of like eggs once it starts cooking. And now it's about halfway cooked. This is a good time if you want to taste it. Make sure you like the spice level. You can make adjustments if you want a little more salt. If you're not watching your sodium, that's fine. A little more pepper, anything else you want right now. And then from here on, it's kind of personal preference. Some people like it a more soft scramble like this. I like to cook mine about another 5 minutes and let it get really crispy. So I'll let it sit and I'll let the bottom get crispy and then I'll stir it in. And I like mine with like little crispy parts and soft parts. But you can see from steam cooking it with the lid on first, it does become really nice and fluffy. And so it's just up to your preference. And that is how we make a delicious plant-based, vegetable-filled scramble for breakfast. Thank you.
Big thanks to Chef Rosa Zamora for the awesome recipe. Join us next week with a veggie fried rice by Fallon Bader with the Sprouting Kitchen. Thank you for watching. Tune in for the next fun and healthy recipe from Cooking for Health.